What's up, guys? Welcome to VHP Engines. I guess this video is fucking long overdue here. The reason why I've waited so long to fucking make it is because this is a topic that I've covered in several different places, different times. I covered it in the build I did that I'm going to talk about here. I've talked about it in scattered videos since then, but seeming as the fact that the last time when I started putting out those videos for the K was like 7 months ago, and that was like fucking way down the subscriber time list. I figured I'd talk about it now, because I know that not everybody here has watched all those build videos, and I think that the information is kind of scattered throughout. And since then, I've still got questions regarding this whole setup. I think the another reason why I haven't actually talked about this in depth is because of the fact that I was waiting for somebody to come up or do the build themselves and actually put down numbers that I could use to support my, which is almost a theory, but not really. I always like to have concrete evidence to back up what the fuck I'm going to say, so that way it's not not coming off as speculation. It kind of lowers the chance for an argument with people. But as I'm sure you've guessed by now with the title of the video, we're going to talk about the K20a3. And as I've also said before, I don't like to throw away anything. I don't like to fucking, generally speaking, the only motor that I will not touch and not look at is that Doc ZC shit from like the ancient times, the dark times. Yeah, so I won't fuck with that engine. But other than that, for most Hondas or for most Honda stuff, I like to find a way to make potential power out of it. And I've also said that I love making power based off Frankenstein shit. I like the Frankenstein engines, and I guess I'll have a time card pop up for that too, for that video, just in case you haven't seen it. All right, so the K20a3, everybody knows it's a piece of shit engine, doesn't make power, blah 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 blah, right? So nobody wants to fuck with the A3. Why does it make power? Does it make power because it's really low compression and because the head doesn't have like the full VTEC that the K20a2 and other engines have, right? So it's got a dumbed down version of VTEC and it has really low compression. And it's kind of crazy to think about it because that engine came out in the SI. So I don't understand why they fucking made a 160 horsepower engine for the SI. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, despite the fact that the B16 was about the same for the EM1, it seems kind of weird to me. But anyway, whatever. Not the point. The point is, can you make decent power with the A3? And the answer is yes. While I wouldn't recommend boost because of the fact that the rods are really small, as also I said before, comparable to the D16 rods. And if you haven't seen that, I'll also leave another link in the cards so you can go see the comparison between like single cam rods and B series rods. And the A3 rods are about the same size as a single cam, really small. So if you've read a lot, or if you've poked around the internet a lot, you found out that you may have seen that around 300 horsepower, around the 300 horsepower range, the stock rod generally give out on the A3. Yes, I know this isn't an exact rule of thumb for every single A3 engine. Not every engine blows up at the same exact power levels, depending on how you drive the car, how often you drive the car, etc., etc. So, but generally speaking, that's exactly where they would around the area they would fail at. And honestly, I wouldn't even try to push 300 horsepower out of a stock A3. It would have to be in the mid to high 200s at most. All right, so you know that Honda rated the K20a3 at 160 horsepower, right? Now, what makes it faster than the B series cousins, or supposedly faster, is the fact that the torque is a little bit higher than let me compare it to the B16, because let me compare it to the B18 and H22 and shit like that. We know those are faster engines. But if you compare the A3 to the B16, around the same horsepower, but a higher torque. So there's that. That makes up for that. Good more displacement. Now you can get an A3 engine like online for like $500 or $600. So that already in itself isn't bad because you're looking at like close to B20 prices. So that's pretty good. But if you buy it, off Facebook or Craigslist or whatnot, you can get those engines as low as like $200. One of the two A3s I bought, I got for $150, and the other one I got in a trade. All right. So A3s, because of the fact that they're commonly believed to be turds, they're just tossed away, and nobody really wants to keep them. It's kind of like me and my attitude towards B18B heads or LS heads. I just like, oh yeah, another LS head. Fuck, I don't care. Throw it in a corner somewhere. I wouldn't pay more than $25 for one ever. Um, so now there's another video I watched. I think it's called. I think the channel is called Honda VTech Academy, where this guy, I think it was it was a K20a4 or a K20a3. But the thing is that, you know, they got this. They put a cheap K in their car, put bolt-ons and dyno tuned it, and like baseline made right about what Honda said. Or it wasn't. I don't even think it was full bolt-ons. I'm lying here. It was just a stock A3, and they threw it in there to see what the baseline was going to be, and it was like 156 horsepower. So if you know, and like from a dyno to what the factory rates the engine, is generally like a 13% power loss or whatnot. So you would imagine that the A3, instead of making it in the 150s, that it would actually put down somewhere like along the lines of the 240 area at the highest. You know, but I think that the Ks have all proven, and especially like with the new Type R, is all proven that Honda is actually giving lower horsepower numbers than what the actually engine is producing. Because if there is that 13% power loss you have to account for every time you're making these engines and shit, then they must be getting higher engine dyno numbers than they're releasing, and they're actually calculating it down to give you something closer to the truth. So that's a cool thing. So if you look at it now, you're looking at the K20a3 and you're thinking 160 horsepower, or the 160 horsepower, you're not very far off from that number, which is good. Because if you look at like a GSR, which is rated around like 180, if you put like a stock GSR on the dyno, you're looking at like 160s, like low 200, or like 170s if you from a stock block. So the A3 is actually not far off from what a GSR would be off rip, and it has more torque, right? So then you look at the A3's cousin, and you're looking at the A2, which is of course the 200 horsepower rated engine, or maybe 205, something like that. And of course the big differences are compression and the head. Has the full version of VTEC. It has much higher compression. I think the A3 is actually in like 9.6 to 1 or something like that, something in that area. And the A2 makes like 11.1 to 1. That's a huge difference in compression ratios, and it shows in horsepower. All right, so taking the A3 and making a useful block, right? The A3 block is pretty much the A2 block. The only big difference is like the oil squirters that it doesn't have in it. That is a non-issue, so we don't worry about that. Now, what we do is take those pistons off the A2, which I did in that build, and slap those on the A3 rods because they're a direct crossover. And of course, it's the exact same fucking bore because it's the exact same fucking block. Now, if you want to make a super budgeted fucking K20a3 that'll still break 200 horsepower, what you do is just you take the pistons, put the pistons in the block, and put full bolt-ons. Because I have seen dyno numbers from a guy who had a stock K20a3 with full bolt-ons, and with full bolt-ons he made fucking like 170-ish. He was in the 170 horsepower range. So you do that 170 horsepower range plus that huge jump in compression, I'm thinking that you're gonna easily, get into the 200 horsepower area right there, as long as you're not, as long as your tuner's not super conservative on your tune or whatnot. So that I think is right there alone is respectable. I mean, like you can pick up a used set of fucking A2 pistons, for a decent price, and so you're not really putting too much into it. If you're looking at the cost of an A2 versus the cost of an A3, you're saving a fuck ton of money, because if you're gonna get like a used A2 engine off of one of these engine importers or some shit like that, you're paying well over $1,000. I think the last time I remember seeing one was like $1,800. So let's say if you're buying the engine from the same place, $1,800 versus $600, and then whatever money you spend for gaskets, piston rings, bearings, if even, and the pistons, you're still saving a fuck ton of money. Now, of course, yes, it's true. If you put the same money into an A2, or put the same kind of effort with the bolt-ons into the A2 is going to make a lot more power. But here's a way we can kind of like close that gap in performance, and you just pick up yourself an A2 head. So I think that once you get the A2 head and you get bolt-ons and the pistons, you pretty much have yourself a poor man's A2, and you're still beating the cost of an A2 by far, because I've never seen an A2 head sell for more than $500. And personally, I wouldn't even fucking spend $500. I think I could Jew the guy down to at least 300, if not 250, and get the head that way. So, let's say you bought your A3 for $600, and then you just paid made $300 for the head, so it's $900. Let's say $100 for the fucking pistons, you're spending $1,000, and then maybe with bolt-ons, if you go on the cheap side, not fucking buy everything expensive, you're gonna spend maybe another couple $100, because at the end of the day, I mean, like, well, bolt-ons are really, you know, an intake, which is generic, you can grab anywhere. Headers, which is also generic, you can get anywhere. And the only thing you're really gonna spend money on is an intake manifold if you go big, and you don't have to. You can get like stock fucking intake manifolds, or a cheap intake manifold for an aftermarket for the K, and spend like $100. So you're still, at the most, you're spending like $1,500 at the most. And honestly, to be completely honest, you can get an A3 for like $200 if you're patient. So $200 plus $200 head, you're looking at $400. So you're already saving. You're already back down to closer to the $1,000 range, instead of like a $1,300 or $1,500 price range, and still want to make in whatever the A2 can make from that. And also, the reason why I'm not going to mention, or the reason why I haven't mentioned so far of like, switching out the valve train or whatnot to make it like a clone of the A2 head, I think that's just way too much effort. I think you're better off just getting the head itself and doing a direct swap out like that, instead of trying to rebuild the head to clone the A2. And also that VTech killer shit, nah, I wouldn't do it. I also made a video on that. Maybe I'll leave the link at the end so that way you can go back and watch that if you're interested. But yeah, so I definitely believe that with minimal effort, you can match what the A2 can put down, like, for horsepower in the NA world. Like, I know that K20 or that 4-piston racing engine made like 500 something horsepower NA, but we're not talking about shit like that, because that's a whole other can of worms. That A2 that they did, because you're looking at a super precise build that's 100% track purpose and whatnot. But 300 horsepower Ks, NA Ks, are something that's relatively common nowadays. If you want to sacrifice daily drivability for the fuel that you're going to need to make that kind of power. But anyway, the reason why I say that you can generally speaking make what a K20a3 can make NA is because of the fact that the rods are like a holdback, a hindrance. Because for you to use like the aftermarket pistons, you would have to get super high compression, you would have to either modify the A3 rod or get aftermarket rods. Aftermarket rods for the A3 are really hard to find, and when you do find them, they're very expensive. So the thing would be to use the A2 rods, but to use the A2 rods and A3, you need to swap out the crank. Unlike the K20a3's cousin, the K24a4, which I personally think is a much better build. And maybe I'll do a separate video for that. And that's the reason why I think that's a more versatile build, is because of the fact that the TSX pistons and rods, the rods are much bigger, and I think the compression from the TSX or pistons are also higher. They're a direct swap over. You don't need to just take the piston. You can take the piston and the rod, and those rods are beefy as fuck. So yeah, I think I'll probably make a K24 video sometime in the near future. And yeah, so I kind of got rambly here. This is much longer than what my normal discussion videos are nowadays, but I hope that this clarifies some shit. The fact that you can use your K20a3, and I know that the numbers may have seemed like they got bigger. I know that there's still people going to argue that you should just use a K20a2 versus the K20a3, but I mean, if you're not looking at buying things brand new and you look at the aftermarket world, like with Facebook and Craigslist and shit like that, even if you find somebody selling an A2, they're gonna still be looking around about $1,000 for that A2 engine, compared to somebody who's looking for a K20a3. They may be asking $300 or $400, but they're not selling that. I promise you that the engine's not moving anywhere. So if you get in there with them and start negotiating, you can definitely get that shit for pennies on the dollar. Like I said, I got my K20a3. One of my K20a3s I got for fucking $150, and it was a healthy long block. So, and then as far as the pistons and rods that I got from the A2, I got those in a trade as well, so it didn't cost me a damn thing. So the K20a3, if you're willing to do the engine build yourself, is definitely a super cost-worthy, a cost-effective way to get, you can make power. I have that K20a2 piston-equipped A3 block that nobody's bought, and just because of where I'm at. I mean, I'm sure that if I was in South Florida still, that would have sold that shit not long after I put it together. But anyway, I'm sure that eventually someday I'll find somebody to either buy it or somebody else will post their similar build like that on YouTube, and then we can track it like that to see how well it performs. Although I'm still extremely confident that that's a 200 horsepower engine with the bumping compression and bolt-ons. Just because of the fact that how well the stock ass K20a3 tunes, versus what the factory rates it at. All right, guys. So if you're new to the channel or whatnot, all my social media links are in the description below. You can hit me up on Facebook or whatnot. If you guys try to private message me on YouTube, I most likely won't see it. But of course, I read all the comments because we don't have too much traffic through here, and so I read everybody's comments and all that stuff. If you got a personal question you want to ask, you can hit me up on Facebook. If you want a closer follow to me on a more personal side, you can follow me on Snapchat. Everybody who has me on Snapchat gets a follow back, and I am pretty active on there, even if I'm not always uploading shit to the story timeline or whatnot. All right, so thanks for watching, and if you got anything out of the video, I appreciate a thumbs up. It helps with channel growth and circulation for the videos and all that stuff. And check out VHP Engines below. You click on the link and see everything I got here. I've got quite a bit of stuff. And peace. See y'all later.